Hi everybody, it's Carol Garrison here with Carol's Creative Escape. It is Monday, June 16th, which means it's time for another Make It Monday. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule if you're watching this live, but also if you're watching this on replay. I know that we're all busy, and so I do appreciate it. I am a paper card crafter from White Bear Lake, Minnesota, and I've been making cards for over 30 years, various techniques, but most recently and for quite a few years back, it's been utilizing fancy papers, cardstock, and rubber stamping, and a couple of the things that go with that. My goal is to simply spread joy one card at a time. Hey Kelly, thanks for joining in tonight. Is to simply spread joy one card at a time. That could be giving a card, receiving a card, or simply helping somebody find their creativity and being able to make a card. And that's really my goal. I hope everybody's had a great week. We just had a busy weekend. It was kind of a rough weekend here in Minnesota, and I won't say a whole lot more than that, but yeah, we just kind of worked through some of the things that happened and move forward. Anyway, I am going to flip my camera over right away tonight. I have a fun, it's a fun fold card, and it's called the Puzzle Fun Fold. And I found this, actually a couple different variations of it on Pinterest. And so I just want to share that with you tonight. You can use really any type of designer series paper with this, but it's most outstanding, I think, if you have one of those scenery type papers that you can cut into these blocks that I'll show you how to do. It makes for a stunning card, but I do have an example or two where I didn't do that, and I will share those with you here in just a moment. Let me flip my camera over and get it connected to my workspace. And again, I'm hoping that Facebook will let me. All right, I go through this every week, and I'm just not going to worry about it this week. I think starting next week, I'm going to practice just a little bit this week, but I think starting next week, I am going to be going live on YouTube. Facebook is just where they're not hanging on to videos anymore. It just makes more sense from a time perspective for me to just go straight to YouTube. And I will share links to that in my page. I'm also hoping that I'll have a little more flexibility when it comes to increasing or zooming in on my, I don't want to go that way. You don't need to see my cord. Zooming in on my projects that I'm working on too. For some reason, it has become just a little more challenging. So I will post links and you'll be able to see that. So no worries. I don't think it should be any different than what you're seeing now, but hopefully it's just a little bit better transitioning and letting you see the things I'm working on. So I told you I am making a puzzle card tonight, and it's partially how the pieces fit together that make it, and then partially how the card folds. So this is my first card. It's a congratulations card, and as you can see, I've cut this paper and all the pieces fit together, but so does the card when I fold it. And so that's where it kind of gets the name. And what's nice about this card is it's another one of those beautiful cards that you can just stand up, and whoever is lucky enough to receive it will be able to display the card as well. And it does have a space inside for you to write a quick note. So this is one kind of with an all-over pattern. If you are going to stamp like I did directly on your designer paper, just make sure that you've got an open space that's big enough that will show off what you have stamped on your stamped image. I'll hold it up just a little bit closer so that you can see what I'm talking about. You want that to be able to show up, so look for just a little opening where you'd be able to stamp whatever sentiment that you want to stamp in there. And we decorated the inside just with a little bit of the designer series paper. All right, that's one sample. This is a sample of one just with an all over pattern, but I did line up my cuts so that these do fit together again if you were to lay them all flat and piece them together. And on the inside, I've just got a sentiment, welcome baby on the front. The world is full of miracles and none so precious as the one on the way to you. And again, a little decoration with designer series paper. And then my third example is another scenery type card. And this is just a happy birthday card. And you can see, I think, very obviously on this one how the pieces go together. And again, it's another great example if you're going to stamp right on your paper of making sure that you've got a light spot so that that's going to show up. And that would be the inside of the card. So let's go ahead and get started. For this card tonight, I'm actually going to be doing my cutting while we are live here, primarily because I want you to be able to see how to cut it, because I think it makes a little bit more sense. So I'm going to set my trimmer up, and the first thing I'm going to do is cut my cardstock. And I need to start with a piece of cardstock that measures 4 1/4 by 9 1/2. So I am going to start by cutting it at 4 1/4, and then I'm just going to go right up to 9 1/2 on my cutting. And then this particular piece, you will be making several different scores on it. We're going to start by scoring it at 1 inch. And then we'll be scoring it again. I've got to find my notes because I kind of worked this out at 8 1/2 inches. Whoops. I need to go this way. So you can, I had this worked out so I could do the 8 1/2 and 1 inch, but just flip it so that each end is scored in at 1 inch. That's probably easier measurements anyhow. And you want to make sure that the valley is the same on both and the mountain is the same on both. Once you've got those two score lines in, I want you to actually flip your cardstock over. And now you are going to score it at 2 inches. Actually, we'll start by scoring it at, this is how it would work. We're going to start by scoring it at 7 1/2 inches. I just started with the larger score line. And then we'll bring it down to 2 inches. Or you can score it at 2 inches, flip it over, and score it at 2 inches. So now you've got 1 inch that's raised up, 2 inches that's a valley, 2 inches that's a valley, and then kind of a mountain. So your outside ones are mountains, your inside ones are valleys, or conversely, if you flip it over, valleys and mountains. All right, that covers the scoring for that piece. Then the next thing that we need to do is cut some cardstock. Now the cardstock that we're going to cut needs to be 2 1/8 inches wide. And so what I found works best, because by the time you're done cutting, you're going to use this whole strip up. If you just cut it at 2 1/8, and then we'll set that piece aside for another project. We are then going to cut a piece at looks like there may be some issues with the filming quality tonight. So I will be getting this out onto Facebook, and hopefully that helps too. Anyhow, we're going to go 3 inches. We'll move this up and we'll do another 3 inches. And then the next cut is going to be at 2 inches. And our final cut will be at 2 inches. You know what? I screwed up. Ignore those cuts. And I'm going to cut my remaining piece of cardstock that I thought was going to be left over. I am going to cut this at 2 1/8, which is where it is, so we don't even need to trim it. And now the cardstock cut is going to be cut at 3 1/4. I was already looking at my measurements for the designer series paper. So you need 2 of these that measure 2 1/8 by 3 1/4, and then 2 of these that measure 2 1/4 by 2 1/8. So I'm just going to line this up at 2 1/4, and this piece should then by default be at 2 1/4. But what I have found is that you may need to trim a little bit off, and so I just line it up and trim any uneven edge off that I've got. And hate when that happens. I'm going to just get my paper snips and do a little cleanup of that trim that I did. So we might, I think part of the video, if you are having some issues with the video, is we've got some stormy weather going through the metro area. Not quite done trimming yet, and I don't know, maybe that's part of it. So the next thing I want to do is work with a scenery piece. Now, in the end, I want a piece that measures 3 3/4 by 5 inches wide. And so I've got to kind of pick and choose what part of this paper I'm going to incorporate into my card. And I am going to trim off maybe an inch or so from down here. And then I'm just going to take a look to see where 3 3/4 brings me. And what I'll be cutting off. And I think I'm going to take off another 1/4 inch. You just got to kind of play. It depends on what part of the paper that you want on your card. And so I think, you know what? Part of it is just cutting it and seeing what it looks like. I always recommend taking off smaller amounts and working your way up. But I think this cut will do it. All right, it's going to. There we go. And then the other thing that I need to do is this needs to be 5 inches wide. This is 6 by 6 paper, so I want to sort of keep this somewhat proportion to how it is in terms of where the seam lies. So I am going to be just taking off a 1/2 inch on either side, and then that will keep it centered in the way that it is right now. All right, and we'll get rid of some of those scraps. And then for cutting this, the cutting is actually quite simple. It is just as our strips of cardstock here were 2 1/8 inch, we need 2 strips that measure 1 7/8. So since this is 3 3/4 inches tall, all I need to do is line this up at 1 7/8, and that will cut my seam in half. Now here's where you kind of want to picture this in your head. I've got a big and a small, and then a big and a small. So on this first one, I need to make sure that my 3/8 inch piece is, or my 3-inch piece is going to fit here. So I need to turn my seam around to make it work. It wouldn't be the end of the world. I would just put my squares and rectangles on opposite sides. But we're going to start with that. And that means then on this piece, the right side is going to be the rectangular 3-inch piece, and the left side will be that square. So again, I'm going to lay this out, but this time I'll have it running the correct way. And then I've got my pieces of paper laid out. That really is all of the cutting that you need to do. I'll lay it out like this, and I think that'll make more sense. So you can kind of see how that image is going to go together here, right? So to start with, oh, the other thing that I've done is I've got just a scrap of white that I'm going to use to stamp my sentiment on. And then I also have a 4 by 5¼ inch piece of white for the inside of my card. So I'm going to start actually by stamping my image now. I do like to give this ample time to dry. And so I'm going to open up my ink pad. And I am making this into a Get Well card. And this is from the So Sincere stamp set, in case you're wondering. It's a Stampin' Up rubber stamp set. And it's just got a lot of really nice sentiments in it. So this is a Hope You're Feeling Better Soon. And I'm just going to stamp this right onto, I've got a glare here, so I'm not seeing what I'm doing. Let me just shift it a little bit. Hopefully. Great. That is in the center, so I'm happy with how that turned out. Sorry, I couldn't see what I was doing. I had just a glare from my overhead light here. All right. We'll set that aside. I am going to clean my stamp off right away because otherwise I will probably stick my card stuff that I'm working on right into that stamp pad, and that would not be fun. One of the things I do like about this stamp set, in addition to the greetings, I really like this horizontal happy birthday greeting. So if that's something you've been looking for, this could be a stamp set that you can consider. If it's retired, you won't be able to order directly from Stampin' Up, but you could probably find a used one somewhere. All right, let's keep moving forward. We'll set that aside so it can finish drying. The next thing I'm going to do is just assemble my pieces on to my cardstock. And one of the things that I want to make sure, because these are not perfectly square, remember they're 2 1/8, and then this is by 2 inches, and that's by 3 inches. So I just want to make sure I've got that width part laid out correctly. And we will go like this and like this. So you see, it is kind of like putting a puzzle together when you're laying it out. And I am just going to take adhesive and I'm going to center it on this piece of cardstock. And then I'm going to take that upper square and I will center this. And again, remember the trick about looking at opposite corners. If they're even, these two, then these two should be even as well. All right, and then we're going to do that lower square. There's just something I've really liked about this card layout and how it looked. You know, I want to make sure. Yep, I do have it going the right way. All right, there's that. So that piece is going to go there. And then we're going to do this last piece right here. So this card is a little bit putsy in all the pieces that you need to cut out, but it really isn't that hard to make. But if you need to make 50 thank you cards or something like that, this might not be the layout that you want to go for. That's up to you to decide. So when I am folding my cards, I want this edge to be mountain. So you're always going to fold in where the bump is. So that's going to be folded in, and I'll go burnish it with my bone folder. And then the next one is mountain, so we're going to fold it in this way. Actually, it's a valley, so you've got mountain valley. That's what, when you hear people talking about that, that's really what they mean. That's a mountain, this would be a valley. And we're going to repeat that same thing on the other side here. And we'll fold that down. And that gives you this part of your card. One last cut. This is optional, but I found that I really liked what it added to the card. And it is kind of a great way to use up card scraps. This doesn't match quite as well as some of the other papers that I use, but it's going to be good enough for what we're doing here. So the scrap that I cut off is 1 inch, and I'm just going to cut it in half so that I've got 2 strips that are 1/2 inch wide. And then I am going to cut each of these strips to be 5 1/4, because of course that's how wide the inside of my card is going to be. And I'm actually going to cut them to be just under 5 1/4. That way, if my card base part on the inside isn't quite at 5 1/4, I don't have any trimming I need to do. All right, that is the last of my cutting. This is an optional step, and you can do it either vertically like I've done on this card or horizontally like I did on this card. Totally up to you which direction you want to go with that. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll finish the inside of the card. I'm just going to take and put this on the wrong side. I am using a silicone mat to add my adhesive, just in case I go off the edge a little bit. I don't want it sticking up my work surface. And here I'm just going to stick this on right at the top. If you wanted a little bit of border showing, you could. But I'm pretty much going to go right to the edge. And then I will flip this over to do the bottom side. You could also decorate this with stamps, you know, either as a background, doing 2nd or 3rd generation stamping, or you could also just decorate with stamps in the corner, or even just a sentiment on the inside. I'm not one that writes lots and lots on the inside of my cards, so if I can fancy it up a little bit with something like this, I probably will try that. Alrighty. So you do use up most of a 6x6 sheet of paper with this card, and you do use up most of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper for this card. And if you goof on your measurements for the rectangles and squares, like I did, you'll use up pretty much all of your 11 by 8.5 piece of cardstock. All right, so that's the inside of our card. It's done. Now, to assemble these pieces, again, we want to make sure that we have our puzzle put together correctly. And so it goes like this and like this, right? Now, sometimes it can be tricky because we don't want to have adhesive on the whole back of this, because otherwise the card will be taped shut. So instead of worrying about how far over to go on these 4 pieces, we're going to make it simple on us, and we're just going to take a piece of adhesive and run the length of the card. The other thing I like about making this card is I don't really have to worry about lining up these 2 pieces. And the reason for that is I just need to know what is the top left-hand corner of my card. In this case, it's right here. Even though I have it flipped upside down right now, I do that on purpose because it helps me line up. And so I'm just going to line up my cardstock here with the edge of the cardstock there. So we're just going to go like this and put it down. It's as simple as that. And then we need to take the corresponding square of paper for this. Actually, we need this piece that goes below. And again, it's just as easy to put this piece on. Just make sure you've got it going in the right direction. And again, we're going to line up as close as we can to the bottom of our card. Now I am overlapping a little bit here. That is not going to be an issue. We're just going to leave it like that. And because we put the tape on this part, you don't have to worry about any tape here either. So we're going to repeat that process for this side. And I just ran out of adhesive. No problem. Like all good crafters, I have another roll of adhesive. And so we've got our adhesive put here. And again, this time I want my little square here and my big rectangle piece here. So I am going to grab this piece, making sure I have it lined up correctly. And like I said, for me, it's easier to see what I'm doing when I've got it kind of turned upside down, lining up those two edges. And then the last piece, we're going to repeat and do the same. Line up the two edges. And there you go. So now you've got this fold that works like this. And so you can see it didn't really matter that these two pieces overlap just a teeny bit. Sometimes that may happen if measurements are off just a little bit. Not a big deal. You can make it work. And then I've got my Feeling Better label here. And I prefer this garden path to this, but I could put it here or here, which I think is what I'm going to do, because in the end, I think those pieces are needed. I don't know if I really like that on the front at all or not. What if we leave the front as it is with the scenery, and we're just going to take this piece and put it right in the middle here. Even though we've die cut it and stuff, we'll add it to the inside of the card in the center, and that way that sentiment can be in there. You can write your little bit of greeting going around it, and you've still captured the beauty of the card on the front side. So that's yet another way you could decorate the card, is let the cardstock speak, the fancy paper speak for itself, and put your sentiment on the inside. Or you can do something like this where that sentiment is both inside and out. Or something like this where you've put that sentiment right onto the designer paper. And the same thing with this card. So this is the Puzzle Fun Fold card. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I will repeat measurements here real quick for you. Again, the basic cardstock piece measures 4 1/4 by 9 1/2. You will score it at 1 inch and then at 2 inches on both ends. And then the cardstock pieces that you need for these two rectangles and these two squares measure 3 1/4 by 2 1/8. You need 2 of those. And then 2 1/4 by 2 1/8. You need 2 of those. And the designer series paper that goes on here is 3 inches by 1 7/8. And this is 2 inches by 1 7/8. So the easiest way to cut these pieces of designer series paper is to cut your paper 3 3/4 by 5, wherever you want your scenery, and then make that cut at 2 1/8 and cut your 3 and your 2 inch squares. Just want to make sure that you're cutting the sides correctly in terms of how your pattern is going to fit onto that card. Thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. I do appreciate it. And I will see you all next week. Like I said, I do think I will be going live, at least attempting to go live on YouTube, mostly to try to get more, just work around some of the things that are changing with Facebook. I have nothing against Facebook. I just need to make it work better for what I'm doing. So thanks again for joining me for this puzzle slider card tutorial. And we will see you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.